Welcome back to this YMCA Heritage Series. If you are joining us for the first time, welcome. And if you have come from another video, welcome back. If you are feeling like I don't know why I'm here, hit the pause button, go and grab yourself a tea or a coffee, and come and spend an hour with me and Jan as we go through a little bit of YMCA history and a little bit of YMCA heritage. So my guest today is a legend within the European YMCA and the YMCA in general. I'm joined by Jan Nissen from Sweden. Jan, hello, welcome.
Hello, Adi. Thank you very much.
It's great to have you here. And let's jump straight in. So we've all heard the name Jan Nissen, but tell me about the name behind the man. Who are you? Where you're from? Family interests? Anything you want to share with us?
Yeah, as you said, I'm from Sweden. I live in Sweden on the East Coast in a very old city called Kalmar, where in the history, the Kalmar Union with Germany and others were formed. So it has been an important city. Now it's just a pleasant city. I'm 77. I worked as a lawyer at the Swedish tax administration in Stockholm, although I only also in those days lived in Kalmar. I'm married since 1969 with Monica, and we have two kids, two boys, born 77 and 71. They live in the Stockholm area, which is about 450 kilometers from where we live. Yeah, that's basically me.
And that's the man. And Jan, before you were involved in YMCA Europe, you must have been involved in local YMCA or national YMCA. Can you tell me a little bit about that, how you got involved, or what were your first impressions of joining the YMCA?
When our oldest son started to school, as is very common here, they had formed a team of soccer players in his class. And for one reason or the other, I became not a manager, but some kind of leader, just an organizer to keep the team on track and so on, and see that we played these games when we should. That was outside the YMCA. And so I kept that interest for some years. So just regular youth leader, nothing special with that. Then I had a friend at my work who was involved in a handball club in Kalmar, a YMCA club. And since he knew me and he knew what I was doing, he tried to make me finish with soccer and go on as a leader in the handball instead. Okay. And for me, handball has always been the sports number one. Not anymore, maybe, but when I was younger, I liked it. So I joined this YMCA club and became more a formal leader together with a friend. And yeah, that is how it all started. I became a member of the YMCA, you could say, thanks to my kids, or my oldest kid. That was the reason when I stepped in. Then you asked about how I proceeded in the organization, or is that another issue? No?
Yes.
Yeah, because I have always been outspoken, and you know, sometimes you are punished for getting more and more to do. And that is what happened with me as well. So I became a member of the youth committee of my local YMCA. I became a member of the board. I organized within the YMCA area sphere in Sweden. We had a lot of championships, YMCA championships. So I organized some in handball. And to do that, I was in contact with the national office, YMCA office in Stockholm. Not the Swedish council, but one layer down in the organization, so to say. Under the umbrella, there was one body that dealt with sports. And being a sports person, I ended up as a president of that sports as a body. And then in 93, I think it was, I became the president of the Swedish YMCA movement.
Wow.
And I stayed there for 4 years. And in the meanwhile, when I was working on a national level, I was nominated for the EAY, YMCA, European Alliance of YMCAs, as YMCA Europe was called in those days. I was nominated to be an assessor in the executive committee, which I became in 1990. And in 1996, I became the president of this, what is now called YMCA Europe, and stayed there for 8 years and left in 2004. And in the last 8 years as the president of the European movement, I was automatically a member of the World Alliance executive as well.
Wow.
So that is my development from a small level to a little higher level.
And Jan, you were sharing with us that you have done a number of roles there, or different platforms, if you will. Do you have a favorite, or do you have a memorable position outside of the presidency? Was there a certain role or anything that you look back at with fond memories, or was hard work, maybe not fond memories, but was hard and good work? Is there any of those platforms that you would look back on and go, that was some good work there that I did?
Yeah, you know, out of my first 6 years in the executive, I spent 5 years as a recording secretary when Terry was the president. Maybe being a secretary was not the highlight of my life, but it was interesting. I learned a lot. I learned the English language better than before. I learned a lot about YMCA, internationally, especially Europeans. But what I remember, without having any special memory, it's more a general well-being feeling. And that was when I started on the European level. I became a member of I don't remember the name of it, but it was a program group dealing with sports. And with my background in the YMCA, that was exactly what I liked to do. So that was, and I still sometimes think back on the people I met there with great pleasure. So that is memorable. But I mean, the most memorable time in my YMCA time is now, when we will come back to that, I guess, with the Field Group Ukraine, but also working in the executive committee of the European Alliance. That was really 14 very interesting years. That went very rapidly, very quick.
And we're going to come to that in a second, but let's just rewind and tell me how did you become president? Did somebody come and speak to you, or did somebody encourage you, or was it a burning ambition that you had, like, I must be the president of the EAY? How does that work, Jan? And how did the voting or the nomination work back in those days? I mean, we're going back a little bit in history now, so maybe a little bit different.
That was an interesting time. You know, I promoted myself. I printed T-shirts. No, I'm joking. I did nothing but being myself. Actually, I was nominated, which is always the case. Your national movement nominates you. And to be honest, I don't really know how that happened in the Swedish movement. Maybe they saw something in me. I don't know.
Obviously, yeah.
So it was as simple as that. And yes, then it was a normal nominations process. And there was voting and things like, nothing special, normal silent process.
As you just alluded to, Jan, that it was a changing time in Europe, and around this kind of time period, and we'll come to the expansion of the YMCA in a second. but I believe you were involved in a very critical time in Europe between the Berlin Wall falling
Yeah.
and the collapse of the Soviet Union. Tell us a little bit about the times, if you will, of your involvement in the international YMCA and what that was like in a changing Europe and in a quick changing Europe as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that now, looking back, it feels even more fantastic than when you are in the midst of it, because
Right.
you are just there. Things happen, and you have to deal with them. So I didn't experience in those days as very special. Of course, I mean, I'm not a fool. I understood the reality, what is happening in Europe with the Berlin Wall falling down and the Soviet Union collapsing. I understood that intellectually, but for the YMCA, I realized it was a big thing. But now afterwards, thinking back, to me, it's even bigger than it was in those days.
I guess at the time you're just reacting and doing your best, as you
Yeah,
said.
yeah, exactly.
And that brings us to, of course, as you just said, those two things before we even come to the Czechoslovakia splitting or the fall of
Yeah,
Yugoslavia, the ever-changing kind of eastern side of Europe, the expansion of the European Alliance, or EAY as it was back in those days. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about how it was and what it quickly or didn't or quickly became over a number of years, what it was and then what it became.
yeah. I remember that our membership in those days, before all this happened, was that we had, I'm not exactly, don't know exactly, but 16, 17, 18 member movements. And as far as I remember now, we didn't talk about cooperating movements like we do now. So we had members and that was it. But very soon we realized in the executive that we will have a big job. We will have a lot of new movements in the East and rebirth movements in the East. I mean, many of these movements existed once before the communist time, and then were not allowed to formally at least exist. Some existed anyway, Polish Y in London, for instance, and some others. But we very rapidly the organization grew a lot, and I saw now the figure is 37. But I mean, only in this first, what should I guess, 5-6 years, we grew by more than 10 movements, which put a high demand, of course, on the organization, the staff, and the volunteers. So it was new times. But as I said, when you are in the midst of it, you don't experience it as something very special. It's afterwards, when you can compare and see what happened after this. Then you realize how big it really was.
And back then, yeah, how was it one half of Europe opening up to the other half? Was that something that was easy to navigate? Was there
sorry, Adi, I didn't get that. Could you?
I said, how was it back then with one half of Europe accepting the other half of Europe, whether it was west to east or east to west? Was there people who were really ready for it? Was there distrust? I mean, we're talking about a very complex time in the history of the world. How was it bringing together countries from the east and countries from the west to common platforms or common purposes?
As far as I remember, this was not a big issue at all.
Right.
I can't remember really any discussions about that. But what I remember was that not in the beginning, but let's say after 5, 6, 7 years, people were starting to discuss the big majority of Western people in the executive, for instance, these kind of discussions.
Yeah.
But I mean, this came, of course, from yeah, we could still call them the Eastern. I mean, Prague is west of Stockholm, so is it correct to talk about eastern countries? Just as a description of them.
Yeah.
But I cannot say that this was really an issue, not as far as I remember. No, it was not, which helped a lot, because if it had been, then that could kill the whole thing.
Sure.
Or at least slow the pace down, which did not happen.
No, and quite clearly it's not. One of the things that I have written here during your time was obviously the changing of the seat of the European Alliance, and that was to move to Prague, I believe.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about why or how that happened, or yeah, is that due to a leadership thing? Is that due to a geographical thing? What was it about the move to Prague that was significant?
I mean, one reason was the cost factor compared Switzerland to Czech Republic. Obvious.
Even today.
Even today, yes. But I guess the difference in percentage was much bigger then than today. Absolutely. That's my guess.
Yeah.
Prague is more centrally located. It's easy to reach. It's a big city. I mean, we were in St. Gallen, which was excellent, beautiful surroundings, but a little bit geographically, I don't dare to say away, but that was the case. It was
some
not a
people
big
like
problem,
traveling, some don't.
it was not a big problem, but it was an issue.
Yeah,
especially the cost factor.
I see. And when the office moved to Prague, that was I guess that was central to Europe and allowed a lot of people to come and be more involved in things and feel like it wasn't as you said at the beginning, maybe a Western Europe kind of organization.
Yeah, it worked nice. They had their big building in middle of Prague, so we rented from the very beginning office space there.
So that was rented, just for those watching who've never been or heard of Prague, that was rented in the YMCA Czech Republic, the Prague YMCA.
Yeah.
YMCA Europe were in the top of that.
As I remember it, the Czech movement got back their big building in the city center, and then they had office space to offer to us, so we rented it for the whole time we were in Prague. We rented office space in the YMCA building in Apoici 12.
And for those who've not been, who are watching, they used to have this very old style elevator that never stopped. It just continued in a circle.
Yeah, it has a special name and I've forgotten what it is.
Yeah, but you
no
had to
doors,
literally
nothing.
jump into this box that was moving in order to get up. It's a heritage item or something like that now.
Yeah.
Completely crazy when you see it, but a wonderful journey to the top with YMCA Europe office.
Yeah, it was.
Well, with saying that, Jan, also during your time, it wasn't always about the office in Prague. There was a dream, or I've read in the history of YMCA Europe that a big emphasis was put on a training center. And I think you were one of them people involved from the beginning in this idea. And tell us a little bit about the training center journey. It's a big story, I know.
Yeah, it was a long story. That was a dream from the YMCA Europe or EAY to have its own facility for trainings. And Johan Wilhelm Eltvik and I don't remember her position, but Jana Voralikova, she became the president, but I don't know if she was at that time, a Czech woman, who were, I think she was an architect. So she had some know-how where to look. So we traveled the country, Johan Wilhelm and myself, many occasions, trying to find a proper place.
In the Czech Republic?
In the Czech Republic, yes. Okay. So we visited, I don't remember now, maybe 5 different places where maybe we could stay. And then we found this wonderful small city, Litomyšl, 1 hour and a half or something from Prague by car, and fell in love with it. That was a part of a big castle, the brewery part. It was not operating as a brewery anymore, but we could use it for our purposes, both office space, training space, living space. So that is the story, how it all started. And we opened it in 2001 at the General Assembly, which we had in Litomyšl at the castle or at the training center.
And the fundraising for that, Jan, I believe there was a lot of people involved and a lot of people giving, and wise men. And
yeah, it started with a big donation from wise men.
right.
That was the starting contribution that made it all possible. Quite a big one. And then we had fundraising, and we had our own means to some extent. I don't remember the figures anymore because it's such a long time. It was in 98 or something we started with it.
But a great example of how to fundraise for a common goal or a common idea, a dream, as you said. And as I was reading through the minutes of the speeches in the assemblies of AEY, every year we were talking about this dream and what we were trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
And, it must have felt like a great day when you were at the opening and when it eventually opened.
It was, of course. And one part I now remember of the fundraising campaign was that we, which is not very unusual, but we did it, sold chairs, beds, rooms even. So we had room named after the donor.
Wow.
And from individuals and from other YMCAs. So it was fundraising on in many different ways and on many different levels. But we managed to fund it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember when we talked previous to this interview, you were telling me that on the day of the opening, you received a key or something like this. Or...
Yes. Yeah, it was the mayor at that time, Brydel. They had produced a big key, I don't know, 20 centimeters or something, wooden key. And I wanted it to be yellow, so I painted it just before I handed it over. So I had key color on my hands for a long time, but not anymore. I could clean.
I hope it's cleaned up after all these years.
It is.
Well, that's a nice story, and of course, people who are watching and wanting to know more, all these things that me and Jan are talking about today, you can link down in the description and read more about the training center, or read more about the expansion into the Eastern Europe and how it was. And Jan, you did 2 terms as a president.
Yeah.
You were re-elected.
Yeah.
Had you not had enough and you thought you wanted a little bit more, or tell us about that re-election?
You know, when you are in the midst of it, it's, for me, it was not even an issue. For me, it was obvious that I would go for a second term because I was not finished. And you should know that this was my first term ran out 2000. Yeah. So it was still when so many things happened. So now for me, it was not an issue. I continued for the second term.
And in the second term, there's some memorable things that stand out in terms of what EAY achieved. I have written here that the Armenian genocide recognition was something that stood out. The YMCA is normally neutral on such things in the world, and this is very specific. Maybe Jan, you could share with us how this came about and what it was like being involved in that.
When I was re-elected I thought that we should, in connection with one of our meetings with the executive, should stay together for 2 or 3 more days to have team building.
Yeah.
Which we did. And we had Michael Wardlow from Ireland, who guided us. Really excellent. Everybody enjoyed it a lot. And I don't remember why, but we just picked Yerevan in Armenia for this purpose. And don't ask me, because I don't remember if there was a background. I mean, if you meet twice, you have to decide where to go. Sometimes you have rational reasons for it. Sometimes you have some kind of feeling, and I guess this was the feelings. So we went there, and for that matter, we invited Carlos Sanve, I mean the Secretary General of the World Alliance. He was invited, and why that happened, I don't know. But we always have invite somebody from the World Alliance, and he was invited, so he was with us the whole time. And being in Yerevan, where this genocide happened in, when was it, 1923 or something. To be honest, I don't remember how this issue came up, but we had, together with our team building exercises, we also discussed this a lot, because as you said, this is not something that YMCA normally do. And for when it concerns the YMCA Europe, it had never happened before, as far as I know. So it took a lot of discussions, a lot of considerations, a lot of consulting, how to, you understand, how to phrase it and so on. But eventually we agreed, we took the decision, and that was in 2001. We took it while we were there.
Wow.
And that's it. And that was, I think the World Alliance supported it, or took it as their own decision the year after.
That's correct. The World Alliance, well, the European Alliance then took it to the World Council, where it was also as a resolution passed. And again, you can read more about that in the links on this video, because as myself and Jan is saying, it's not common for the YMCA to sometimes take these kind of stands or positions. But yeah, that was certainly something significant. And again, Jan, during your second term as presidency, I guess one of the most significant things was the Prague Festival, the first Prague Festival. Tell people about that first. I mean, how you just sat around one day and saying, let's do a festival for 5,000 people? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, not really like that. That was like with the training center, a discussion we had for long, because there were so many unknown factors. Can we organize it? Do we have the capacity? Can we take the financial risk? Could we find a venue that suits us? But slowly we worked all these things out and had it in August. Actually, it was the dates for the festival passed my birthday, just by coincidence, of course, because the festival was in the beginning of August. And as you said, again, I say that a lot, but it's many years ago, but we had 5,000–6,000 people.
Yeah.
And we had some struggle with the finances and how to organize it, how to handle the finances and the applications and the payments and things like that. But it was a learning lesson, and I was not involved in the one that came 5 years after, but I heard that it went much more smooth than the first one, because you have to learn the lesson first time. But it worked out. No financial catastrophe, no financial success either, but that was not the main thing was not to have a big surplus. The main thing was to make so many young people come together for a week in wonderful Prague. And we had a lot of assistance, of course, from the Czech movement, but also from the local authorities in Prague. They were really helpful, organizing, I mean, free transfer on the trams and buses and a lot of these things.
And I guess this would have been one of the first times that on scale that it was kind of a European-wide YMCA event with people from all sides of Europe, up, down, left, right, and I believe even people from across different continents.
I was going to say that it was not only European, there was a big group of people from North America, US especially, and we had from all over the world, Asia, I think we had from Australia, wherever, not many, but we had participants. And I think you are right, this was, as I remember it, the biggest European YMCA event ever when it happened.
Yeah, and that must make you feel proud. In terms of, is there anything from the festival being there? Was there a certain energy, or was it just different young people all over the place? Or was there tensing? Was there sports? I mean, I wasn't there. This is before my time, but to bring, 5,000-6,000 people together, that must have been an incredible experience. Not just the financial side and the risk side, but the actual, the actual festival itself.
Yeah, I mean, with so many people and a very extensive program, there was something for everybody all over this huge Letna Park, as was the name of the venue, more or less in the middle of the city.
So, of course, Jan, during your time as president, you probably worked a lot with Johan, who was the Secretary General at that time.
Yeah.
Is there any, or as you were saying, you guys were riding around the Czech Republic looking for venues. Do you have any fond memories of executive meetings or travels across Europe or stuff with Johan that you just maybe share with us to conclude this section before we move on to kind of the field groups? Is there any kind of thing that you visited with Johan, or a country that you went and visited, or a Y that was reopening that you remember as a nice experience or a fond memory?
Yeah, I'm really trying to think to find something. I mean, the basic thing was that it was very easy to work together with Johan Wilhelm, as we call him. And he was employed during my time as the Secretary General, because we come from the same background. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not so good. But in our case, it was a very creative partnership the two of us had. And I would say this is more what I remember than from our working together for so many years. Not a special moment, because I cannot think of.
There was probably so many, right?
Maybe, yes. You got used to them, and that's why you don't remember them.
Well, let's turn a little bit. Another great thing during your time involved in the EAY was the field groups. Maybe you can just tell for those watching, because I think that's old terminology in the modern YMCA. There's only a couple of field groups left. What is a field group, and why are they important?
Yeah, the whole field group system was developed when we realized in 1990 or about that we needed to do something. How do we assist those developing or emerging movements? How can we organize that work? And how can we involve as many people as possible outside of the executive, because we cannot do everything, of course. And then somebody, not me, I don't remember who, but not me, found this formula, this concept with field groups and partner groups, which are all part of the same concept. The formation of a field group, it was all regulated in terms of reference, how to do it, of course. So there were certain clear rules how who decides about the field group, who appoints the leader, who appoints the members of the field group. And of course, this is a matter for the executive of the European Alliance to decide of forming a field group, and also to appoint the leader of the field group. The rest, who will be members or representatives, as we call them, in the field group, that was decided by the leader and the field group itself, because the thinking behind the field groups were that focused, sometimes we had field groups focused on Baltic states and St. Petersburg, but in principle it was focused on one country or one sphere of countries like the Baltic states. So it was not all. Each country had its own field group if they wanted. And the thinking was that there are so many movements in the YMCA world who would like to take part in this, because it's an exciting building up activity of new YMCAs. And when you have so many, like when you have natural catastrophes, there are too many coming in, you have to organize and streamline it. Everybody cannot do everything. You have someone to decide what to do. And that was the role, one of the roles of the field group, to coordinate the efforts of those countries who were partners to this country where the field group was formed around. So
I believe there was also some field group participants, not just from Europe, we're talking as well.
Yeah, sure.
From the North America came. Or...
Yeah. US were involved quite a lot through their national office, but also I think from different YMCAs in North America. Honestly, I don't remember if there was some other countries outside of Europe than North America. Canada was involved, but North America, I mean, I don't remember any outside. I don't think Asia. I'm not 100% sure.
But pretty much a movement had to have maybe an international arm or interest, and even some resources to contribute. I think that's the principle, right? And you are involved in one particular field group, and I think that's also one of your passions.
Before Adi, let me
please.
just say two words about the partner groups as well.
Sure.
Because that is very important. Because when the field group, and normally it's the field group itself who decides when the time has come to close it. Not always, because sometimes it feels nice for the country to have it, even if it's not that needed. So the executive could decide, but normally this is not an issue. It's more or less automatic when it should happen. And then just to continue the more not so formalized cooperation, you can turn it to a partner group.
Okay.
And the leadership and the members of the partner group, it's totally up to the people there. It's nothing for the executive of YMCA Europe to decide about. It's in the structure, but it's totally autonomous towards the executive. And then when my term was coming to an end, or 2 years before, actually, it was 2002, I was approached by Johan Wilhelm if I could consider to assume the responsibility for one field group. And what was at stake at that time was the Ukrainian field group. I had never been to Ukraine. I didn't know much about Ukraine. The only thing I remember from school was that it was a big farmer's land. We all learned that. all the wheat came from Ukraine. That was what we learned in school during my time. And I also remember one German asked me, why should you have this figure? You have never been there. You don't know anything about it. No, but I'm able to learn. So I assume that responsibility, and in the very beginning of 2003, I formally started my role as a leader of Figure of Ukraine. And then that meant I had one more year as a president as well. But that was the only way of doing it because of the time, the flow of the time and how things work.
So being involved in the Ukrainian field group, I think just from our pre-meeting about this, that's a real passion of yours, or something that you've really enjoyed and made some great friends and contacts and extended family members over the year. Tell us a little bit about that, the Ukrainian field group, and some of the things that obviously that you feel you've achieved, or I don't know, some of the people that you've met. I think, of course, when we're recording this, there's the horrendous situation in Ukraine at the moment, but you've been involved in for a long time with that field group and with those people. So perhaps Jan, Jan, a little bit just from that.
Yeah, as I said, I started in 2002.
A long time.
Yeah, it's more than 2002. Yes, 20 years. Where to start? I remember my first trip. That was in 2003. In those days, we needed visa to go there.
Wow.
And then that was, I don't know if you remember, but Ruslana won the Eurovision Song Contest in 2004. She's Ukrainian. So in 2005, or maybe it was 1 year earlier, I don't remember, the final should be there. And then they had a time window for 3 months where they didn't need any visa for people to come, because it was too much job to do it. And then they never introduced it. So that's the background why we don't need visa to go to Ukraine anymore, which was, of course, a big relief. But anyway, I was there. My first stay was actually in what is now occupied, Crimea. We had the first figure meeting where I was involved was in Crimea, and we had a pre-meeting in Sevastopol, where the Russian fleet now is. Yeah, it was there in those days as well, but now it's a different situation.
Yeah.
And then we traveled to Kiev, and I didn't know what to expect. I mean, communist, gray, whatever. And I mean, just stepping out of the bus or taxi, I don't remember, in Kiev, it was a wonderful picture. It's a beautiful city. So I fell in love with the city and the country immediately, and its people, nice, kind, clever people. And it has been like that since then. I've been to, now first the pandemic and now the war has stopped me traveling there. So my last travel was, my latest travel was in 2019. And I think that was number 38 or something, to Ukraine.
Wow, that's a lot of times.
It is. Some of them for figure meetings, some of them, I was also together with a friend from the Swedish movement, teacher, seminar, or leader of seminars, teacher of trainings. I was there 10 times, I think, for board members training was my thing. Being a lawyer, board members and constitution is, it's close to my heart, so to say, generally speaking. So I've been there a lot, traveled with Victor all the time. He was the Secretary General, Victor Sabelov, already when I entered, quite new then. So we have traveled in his car all over the country. I think I've been to most of the YMCAs there, for instance. And I see, if we leave apart what is happening now and the pandemic, I could see that there were big potential. As I said, clever people, ready to learn. And I also, at the time of the history when the Swedish movement, who had a big international partnerships, many countries, they were trying to reduce. I managed to convince the Swedish leadership that why don't you go in with the SIDA, I mean the Swedish International Development Agency, try to find money there. And they thought it was good. We did a pre-study, and it turned out was very good. So it was decided to go in there from Sweden. And normally Sweden is involved 5-6 years. And now this was in 2006, I think, and they're still involved. So this was a really long-term, yeah, not one project, different projects, of course, and that's different. And now I don't exactly know what they are doing. So this was a big thing for me. It was a big thing, even bigger for Sweden. And I could see the progress made.
Well, thanks for sharing. And Jan, during your time involved in field groups and even in YMCA, Europe, EAY, whatever we're calling it at any given time, talk a little bit about some of the restrictions, because obviously new countries or different regimes, or as you alluded to, different systems in countries, that can make it tricky sometimes for, you know, when people are thinking all YMCAs are different. So my YMCA is different from everybody else's, but in terms of there can't be one way that all YMCAs operates. But over the years, you must have, especially given your background and as a lawyer, you must have encountered a lot of restrictions and difficulties in just doing things. Share with us a little bit about some of those challenges.
Yeah, I very well still remember one issue where I, as a lawyer, really had to fight with myself.
It makes a change.
I will not mention what country it is, because
Okay.
it still can be sensitive. But you know, we had, or they still have, I guess, criteria. What do you demand from movements who wants to become members? What has to be included in the constitution, for instance? Paris basis, Christian movement, whatever.
Yeah.
We had an application from one country who should not be allowed to operate if they include all our requirements in their constitution. That was clear. So what to do? Maybe to create two different constitutions. One for the authorities.
One internal.
Yeah. So we did that. And I guess you can imagine the struggle I had with Jan. But of course, I'm a pragmatic person, so it was not a big thing, but I'm more or less joking about it. It was clear for everybody that we have to do that, and we did, and it works excellent. That was, I guess, one of the most tricky things, because it's on a level that you could kill it or you could do the other one, the other way around.
And there are, of course, maybe not from your presidency, let's just state that, but there are even modern examples of movements that we had in the past that are no longer operational. I mean, I think Cyprus once upon a time was running, YMCA in Turkey was once upon a time running, and things change, things evolve, and things you know, it goes a different way. So who knows, whoever's watching this video in the future, whenever you're watching it, maybe count and see how many national movements or member movements there are, because who knows where it'll take us. I often think, Jan, and it's been great talking to you, and we're having a little bit of camaraderie and a few jokes here. It's really nice. But a lot of the YMCA is not the buildings or even the journeys, it's the people that you meet along the way. And you've mentioned some people that have been on your journey, like Victor from Ukraine, Johan, and that. Who else has been significant in your journey over the years? I guess you could call it your career in the YMCA, even though it was voluntary, a lot of it. But who's been significant in your journey, Jan?
There are many people. You know, the first Secretary General of the YMCA, when I was actively involved in the executive committee, was Dölf Veder. And being this recorder, I needed a lot of talks with him, and he I don't really know how, but he made a great impact with his clearness, his visions, how he could describe things. Simply said, you just trusted him. So that was wonderful to work close with him. And then, of course, my big mentor to many, Terry Ratcliffe. You cannot talk about YMCA Europe without mentioning him, because he was one of a kind. Sadly, he passed away, you know that, last year in November, I think. And being the recorder for 5 years with him as a president, of course, we had close contact, because my position then, and because I was new in the executive. And I mean, he has to sign the minutes. So I had to write them so that we agreed, which meant that I had a lot of contacts with him. And in the beginning, the first year or two, I actually sent the minutes to him before we finalized it together. And I mean, on the funny side of the history, I remember that sometimes he corrected my English with his English, and I could find my English in the dictionary, but I couldn't find his. We talked a lot about that. But I mean, he was one of a kind. He is really a legend in the YMCA Europe, that's for sure. There are others, of course, Egon Slopianka, but I didn't have that much to do with him, because I mean, he left when I came in, or even, no, he left when I came in, yeah, I think it was. Then when Dölf came in, Dölf succeeded Egon.
Yes.
Yeah. And you know, from him, you know, the paper I sent you, that there are some interesting information.
There is, yeah, there is. And again, a lot of what me and Jan are talking about, if you're still with us and you're getting to the end of your coffee cup like I am, we thank you for joining me and Jan today and going through some of this heritage stuff. But everything we're talking about, please click the links in the description and go and check out some of the history of YMCA Europe, or AEY, whatever else it is that we've called it over the years. And you can find documents from Dolph and speeches from Johan, and the paper that Jan is alluding to from Egon himself. It's all there. So please go and check that out. Jan, as we come to the end of our time together today, this hour's flown by, I'm sure, just as our careers in the YMCA have.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else you'd like to mention? It's always easy to talk about the presidents and the general secretaries and people like that. Is there anybody from your time involved, either colleagues in the field group or colleagues in the executive, or that you feel you just want to mention and just say, you know, these are really solid people, or these are also legends in their own right? Maybe not, they never got to the position of president or leader, or they never even had that interest. But is there other people from your time being involved that you'd like to mention and just acknowledge today?
Yeah, one obvious person, of course, is a person that is still highly active, who planned to retire, but because of the war, doesn't. And that is, of course, Viktor Serbulov in Ukraine. And we have become very close friends, also family-wise. So if to pick out one more person besides those I mentioned before, it would definitely be Viktor.
Oh.
He meant a lot. And, you know, maybe this is good and this is bad, but he is also a lawyer. So we speak the same language.
When we get the lawyers together, that's when stuff gets done, right? So, Jan, I really appreciate your time today, and I'm just wondering if you could finish with a story or a special memory or anything from your time being involved in the YMCA. Maybe it was a certain meal, maybe it was certain, I don't know, coffee, bar, maybe it was a certain country. Maybe you could just give us one little thing from your extensive journey and time together that will always stay with you, that you wouldn't mind sharing, just for those watching that are like, wow, he's done a lot, but again, just something that meant something to you personally.
Difficult, but
Of
I
course.
would, I mean, the thing that always come into my mind when these questions are raised is the key thing, 2001, because having this key on the podium, giving an opening speech, and the key is always slipping out of your hand because it's just painted. I never forget that. So
of course, Jan,
any more significant than that, I cannot find out.
No,
just like
listen,
that.
I think it's pretty significant opening the training center that was a dream, as you put it earlier, and had so much goodwill and emphasis and giving and fundraising put into it, and stands today, even today, as a great example of community building and fundraising. So I'm sure that was a great day when you were there, even
It was, yes.
even if the key was wet and slippery. I'm pretty sure that felt like, quite often in the YMCA, we set off to do things. And when you achieve them, there's a real sense of we did it. And I think that's what you must have
That was
felt.
it, definitely.
So we've come to the end of our time together today. And I just want to thank you, Jan, for giving us some time and sharing a little bit about your journey and your experience. And if you've managed to get to the end of this video and you've enjoyed listening to me and Jan, please go and check the other heritage interviews with other staff members, presidents, and individuals who've been involved in the heritage of the YMCA Europe or the EAY or whatever else we've called it on any given day. So Jan, any final words or comments from yourself?
A question, where to find the interviews?
They will be available on YMCA Europe websites and social media. So they'll all be there. And so that's the only question. And I'm glad that's a question. Make sure you look after the heritage and it will look after you. So thank you very much from myself and Jan. Jan, thank you for your leadership on behalf of the YMCA movement. And I've really enjoyed our conversation today. So all we will say now is goodbye.
Goodbye, Adi. Thank you.